Hello guys, my name is Tom Antos and I'm here with my brother Lucas.
Hello.
And 2016 is almost at an end. We have 2 days left, right?
Right, 2 days, yeah.
Yeah, two days left till 2017. So we wanted to kind of do a quick recap, I guess, of things maybe worth mentioning or maybe not so worthy of a mention. Well, I guess there wasn't really, I went to an NAB this year. There wasn't really too many things that I think happened this year. There are definitely some cameras that I think are worth looking into if you're a filmmaker. So what we decided to do is kind of like a shootout, comparing these different cameras. But in terms of other gear, there was some drones and things like that came out. But I would say, camera-wise also didn't seem like any big cameras came out. But there were some cameras that were, for example, announced in 2015 and officially released, but they weren't really available till 2015. So 2016. I'm already getting mixed up with the years. And so we kind of decided to put those cameras into our little test comparison. So you could sort of call it a 4K camera shootout of 2016. Even though for the most part, there are some cameras that technically came out a year before that. But
they include some cameras that were released in 2016, but you cannot really buy them this year. So
like
exactly. The Sony A6500, right?
Yeah.
So instead of we are reviewing the A6300.
Well, so we picked 5 cameras.
5, okay.
And also we picked them. There's a lot of cameras we could have picked. We can include all of them for various reasons. Accessibility is one thing, but also price point. I didn't want to pick something that's not going to be realistic for most people to get. So we picked the cameras all the way from around $900 to $5,000 price range, which makes it accessible to like seasoned filmmakers, but also somebody who's just getting into videography.
But we also picked cameras that are the best value in their price range.
Exactly.
Right? So.
And they all have, I would say, also specialties in different areas, right? And like I said, $900. The camera, I think, right now that's came out this year that I think is worth mentioning. Definitely is from Panasonic, and it's the G85.
Yeah, $900, but actually I would get it with a stock lens. For extra $100, you get the lens. Nice thing about it is that lens is one of 2 lenses that actually supports the latest firmware for the dynamic IS from Panasonic. So if you want to have the best IS from Panasonic, do get that lens.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's still affordable.
It's still affordable, $1,000.
And the next camera is the Sony A6300, which I don't even remember now exactly if it technically came out at the end of 2015 or the beginning of this year. I know I didn't have a chance to use the camera till April of this year. So because of that, like I said, we're including it in here, and I did a review earlier on. I'm gonna, like I promised, I'm gonna do a follow-up. This is one of those follow-ups.
Focusing on for filmmakers.
Yeah,
right?
but I'm gonna do another, a more detailed review of this camera again. Yeah. But again, I think in this shootout, it's gonna be interesting to see how it compares with all these other options, and it's a very affordable camera.
I think it's $1,000 body.
Yeah, just again, prices do change. So if you guys want to see the latest prices, just check the links in the description of this video.
And once the A6500 is actually available, there's a good chance that the 6300 will be discounted. So.
Yeah, so, but definitely a camera to look out for. And what interested me in it was, it almost seems like a mini, and a cheaper version of the Sony A7S II. Has low light capabilities, has all these different features, but it just doesn't have the full frame ready. So that's one of the reasons also why I would say it's an interesting or worthy camera to look at. Next camera and the price, I guess, goes it's going to be around $1,500. That's actually an older camera. It's the Panasonic GH4. And I just
we can't stop talking about that camera.
I just threw it into this test simply because of me. I was curious to see how my favorite DSLR or DSLM type camera kind of compares to these other cameras. I still use the GH4, so that's the reason why. Then the next camera we have is a lot more expensive. It's $3,000 or just under $3,000. It's from Blackmagic. It's the URSA Mini 4K. It's, I would say, the most affordable 4K, or most affordable, you could just say, cinema camera. It's like a proper cinema or film kind of a shoot. It's maybe not the best for documentary and that kind of stuff. Definitely needs light, but it has shoots in RAW, so it's the most affordable, I would say, if you want to shoot RAW, get the crispest, nicest image quality, and it has a global shutter, which is amazing to get it at that price point. So that's the fourth camera, and the last camera that we tested out is the URSA Mini 4.6K, and that one is just under $5,000. And I think that is just, the most amazing thing about it is, it has a lot of the similar amazing features like the cheaper version, the 4K version, but the biggest thing for me is the fact that it offers 15 stops of dynamic range.
That's
what's advertised. Just like with the Sony A6300, the Sony advertises that it's 14 stops of dynamic range, right?
So we're about to find out.
Yeah, exactly. You never know with these things because manufacturers always say one thing and then another thing happens. Now, what is dynamic range? Why is it important? Quickly, I guess, I'm going to be doing another video about this, but you can kind of say dynamic range is maybe not so important usually when you're in control of the lighting, but if you're shooting, especially like here outside, maybe we don't have direct sun here today, but if there was direct sun and you have really extreme, let's say, shadows, but then you also have highlights, that basically just means the difference between the brightest and the darkest point of your image is really big, lots of stops of light. So a camera that doesn't have a big dynamic range cannot handle that. So either things are going to be blown out or things are going to be underexposed. Camera that can handle bigger dynamic range can basically see more into those shadows and to those highlights. So it's definitely a good option to have if you're shooting like documentaries or things like that. That's where having that extra dynamic range is really good because you don't have to worry about the light changing as much. So that's one thing, and that's the first test that we do. So to test it out, I actually did basically my own test chart or dynamic range test chart. I did not bother getting some super expensive test charts because at the end of the day, you really don't need those. Really, to test out the dynamic range, like I said, you need to have a shot where you have a certain number of stops or change of stops of light. So I did it very simple. I took a piece of cardboard, cut out little windows in it, put ND filters, just stack them in each of the windows and then basically put a light behind it, like an LED, so we had a kind of consistent light source. And then to make sure that my test chart is accurate, I actually went in with my light meter and one by one, each one of the windows multiple times, just double checked it or triple, quadruple checked it, I forget now. I measured to make sure that each window basically is a difference of 1 f-stop. And altogether it's 16 stops of light that this test chart can actually show you. Anyways, I guess without further ado, just show you guys the test. And now when it comes to the settings of my camera, I always made sure to be shooting in the native ISO of each camera, since that's when cameras perform their best. And when adjusting for the exposure, I would always expose the left side of my test chart, which is the brightest window, at 100%, meaning it would be just a pure white, pixels, or 100% or overexposed. And then the next window would be just underneath that, so it wasn't actually 100% white. And then from there, I could get consistent results with each camera, so I can kind of judge them against each other. So first, we're going to test out the URSA Mini 4.6K. And if you look at the top at the waveform, you can clearly see these steps, which show you just how much each of the windows here on the bottom is actually exposed. So by simply counting those steps, you can tell how many stops of light each camera is able to capture. So let's just start counting right from the top. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then 15. So clearly you can see 15 stops, and this is where I would stop counting because the last stop is already touching the bottom noise floor. So even though there's something a little bit more visible to the right, I would not count that obviously as another stop of light because it's pretty much identical to the 15 stop. But definitely this camera can capture 15 stops of dynamic range, which is great to hear because a lot of times manufacturers do exaggerate these numbers. Alright, so the next camera is the URSA Mini 4K, and this one shoots natively in ISO 400. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stops of light. The one to the right is again just too similar, and it's already also touching the bottom noise floor, just like the previous one. But anyways, 10 stops of the dynamic range that this camera can capture. So also pretty good, obviously not as good as the URSA Mini 4.6K. Now the next camera is the Sony A6300.
And here, this first test is in S-Log3 at ISO 800, which is the native ISO of the camera. And let's just count it off. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and you could say 14 stops of light, although this one is very close to the noise floor. So I would say 13 stops of dynamic range you can comfortably say is within this camera. And that's an S-Log3. Now I'm going to also test out the S-Log2. So here in S-Log2, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And definitely I will not count 13 simply because it's very, very similar to 12. There's almost no difference. So I would say 12 stops of dynamic range in S-Log2, 13 stops maybe in S-Log3. Now I actually would never really use this camera in S-Log3 simply because S-Log3 is too noisy for me, whereas S-Log2 is actually creates a beautiful usable image. Now if you were wondering how this camera performs if you're using, for example, something like the Cinegamma 2 profile, then here, let's count it off. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and you can also say 12. So very similar pretty much, I would say, to S-Log2, but I think maybe S-Log2 is actually a better way to go with this camera. Now the next camera is the Panasonic G85. So in Cine-like D profile at ISO 400, which is again the native ISO of this camera, here we have this many stops of light, so let's count it off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So 10 stops of light. So in a way you could say almost identical or very similar to the URSA Mini 4K camera. Which of course is a lot more expensive than this camera. Now this camera also shoots in other profiles. So the other, I would say, really popular one is the Cine-like V, more like a kind of a standard video camera, which you can see it's a lot more contrasty, and because of that you definitely see a lot less of these windows here in my dynamic range test chart. So anyways, let's count it off. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you could say 9 stops of dynamic range. So Cine-like V, but I would even say maybe more like 8 even. 8 stops of dynamic range, simply because this one here on the top and the one on the bottom are very close to the maximum. So I would say you have 8 stops of dynamic range that's usable in Cine-like V, and Cine-like D you have 10 stops of dynamic range on the Panasonic G85. Now the next camera is the Panasonic GH4, and here in Cine-like D, again at ISO 400, which is the native ISO, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 safely, you could say. You could say maybe there's something there, but not for me. This is too close to the noise floor. So I'm just gonna say we have 11 stops of dynamic range in Cine-like D. So it seems like it's well, maybe it's a little bit better than the G85, although it is even to that it's very close. Now in Cine-like V we're definitely getting less of a dynamic range. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And again, the 10 I would not count. So again, getting, you could say 9, safely 9, stops of dynamic range. So compared to G85, it's again 1 stop over in Cine-like V. In the G85, we're getting 8 stops of or 8 stops of usable dynamic range. Whereas here on the GH4 we're getting 9. Now this camera also allows you to shoot another profile, which is like a sort of a true log profile that Panasonic released called V-Log. So here, as you can see, I shot the test chart using V-Log, and let's really see if the V-Log gives you a big advantage. As like I said, in Cinelike V, we were able to capture 11 stops of light. So let's see if VLAC can beat that. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So really, you know, there's 12 is definitely not usable. Again, I would say that VLAC is definitely, I don't think it's a really an advantage in this camera using that image profile. And actually the one, you know, for when it comes to getting, you know, trying to capture more dynamic range. But I think one huge disadvantage with VLAC is the fact that it creates a lot of noise, which as you can see here in this image, the noise, even at ISO 400 is pretty bad. Now, just for the hell of it, I also decided to test out the Canon 5D Mark III because I think, you know, a lot of people who maybe don't own any of these 4K cameras, you know, but maybe own like an older camera like the Canon 5D, might be kind of curious or thinking, is there a big difference when it comes to, for example, the dynamic range of these new sort of new breed of 4K cameras? So anyways, here's how the test, the same test of the dynamic range looks with the Canon 5D. And this is what I would say, you know, it's kind of like the first generation of these kind of decent DSLR slash, you know, the video or affordable video cameras with a really beautiful image quality. As you know, any of you who've worked with the Canon 5D Mark II or III would probably agree with me. So let's see just how much of a dynamic range it has, comparing it to these new cameras. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and yeah, definitely I would say 10, no more than that. So as you can see, 10 stops of the dynamic range I think is more than enough. If you're happy with the way that the Canon 5D, for example, Mark III performed when it comes to the dynamic range, then I think you'll also be happy with these new cameras, since they all perform basically within that range or above it.
So I'm sure the camera geeks were super thrilled with the dynamic range test. But what does it really mean, you know, for an average Joe or an average Lucas like me? In terms of like the, you know, when you look at that, like an image, you know, you might actually use, you know, in your projects, do you see a difference?
Yeah, I mean, like I personally am not a fan of doing too many of these test charts and things like that, because really the most important thing is how a camera performs in real life, right? Like when you're shooting. So that's what the next test is going to be really good at. Now, next test is basically this little parlor scene that we, you know, kind of, you know, set up. Very simple lighting. One of those actually this chandelier that was at the location, and then I put one big softbox, just kind of shooting straight at our models. It's actually our cousin Isabella. She's a designer. She designed some clothes and stuff like that for some of our productions. If you guys want, actually, you can check out her YouTube channel. I'll provide the link. But anyway, so I just put one strong kind of a soft light, so it provides just a nice pleasing light on her. And then I put another backlight, backlighting her. And then as she walks through the scene, we're gonna shoot this on all the different cameras, and you can kind of see how she basically reacts in different lighting situations. Now I did take measurements of the scene with my light meter. So when her ending position is where I'm kind of basing as my base, you could say, exposure setting. Now when she goes over, basically when she first enters, she's actually 2 stops under. When she goes over to the second position where she takes off her vest, it's actually 2 stops overexposed because she's really close to that key light. And then also that hair light that's lighting her hair is actually 3 stops over. So altogether, I would say the part of the scene that we really care about in this test has basically a dynamic range of around 5 stops of light. And since we saw from our dynamic test chart, right?
Our cameras all can handle at least 9, right?
Yeah, they can all handle 9, and some of them can handle, you know, up to 15. So because of that, not all of those cameras should have no problems handling this scene. But really, I would just say in this scene, maybe just keep an eye out, see how, I guess, those, you know, the really extreme highlights roll off, how each camera handles that, but also just the overall crispness, quality of it, whether there's any more kind of artifacts. Those are things to look out after, and then really, I guess, how the colors look and things like that. Although even that, you have to expect that each camera is going to be different because they have different image sensors, they use different lenses. I couldn't use the same lenses on all the cameras simply because they have different mounts and things like that, so it was not possible. Perspective sometimes will change a little bit in the tests too, so that's one thing to be aware of, simply because it was impossible to put all the cameras in one spot. So that's one thing, but overall we'll show you kind of how this scene looks shot on all these different cameras, and kind of, I guess, whether you see a big difference or not, whether you prefer one image over the other.
But anyway, so let's start this test. So first is the URSA Mini 4.6K. I'm shooting in RAW and ISO 800. White balance is set at 4000, which is going to be identical white balance for all the cameras. And as you can see, when she walks in through the scene, and all the positions, even though she's walking through 5 steps of dynamic range or a difference in lighting, yet you can clearly see her face. You can see all the details beautifully, and all the little highlights and the shadows are also noticeable. Now, if you look at the shot again, the shot looks basically lifeless. Doesn't have enough contrast, doesn't have enough color, and that's because it was shot in RAW. So the RAW settings, if you were to just output the shot, that's how it looks. That just simply means that the camera is able to capture a lot more of this dynamic range. But when you add the proper sort of color correction, so that the shot actually looks balanced and sort of ready to, for the general audience to view, then this is how the same shot now looks. So as you notice, the camera again, it shows you that it's able to capture all of this dynamic range that we have in the scene, yet at the same time it produces beautiful colors. I think all the nice details in the if we look at, for example, the little crystals under the candle light, all those little things, everything looks really nice, I think. Now the next test is with the URSA Mini 4K. And again, this is in RAW, so it's going to look kind of flat and uncontrasted, kind of and colorless shot. Again, the same white balance and everything else. And as you'll notice, again, this camera, even though it captures a lot less, of a dynamic range than their 4.6K version, it's still able to, I think, replicate this whole scene and make it look really nice. So here again is the same shot, but after it's been color corrected. And I think you'll agree with me that even here, when she's taking off the vest and she's really close to that key light, there's no weird overexposure or things like that. We can still see all the details. Now, obviously, it's not going to perform as well as the URSA 4.6K, simply because, like I said, it cannot capture as much light into those highlights, or as much detail, I should say. So here again, for comparison, here's that same moment, but shot with the URSA 4.6K. Now the next camera is the Sony A6300. And an S-Log2 at ISO 800 and white balance again 4000. This is how the shot looks. So again, this is ungraded, so it's very flat looking, boring. But as you can see, where the camera is able to capture all the dynamic range, and it also seems to have no problems handling any of the details. So no moire or anti-aliasing kind of problems. Now, by the way, if you guys want to see all of these tests but an original 4K resolution, then I'm going to upload a separate video of that. Again, the link will be in the description of this video. Now, here's that same shot, but color graded. So you see this is how it looks. And again, the camera performs nicely, captures, I think, all the details. Colors look really nice. Now, when it comes to my opinion, overall, I like how the A6300 performs. And in S-Log2, I think it does a pretty good job, but still, when it comes to colors, sort of like right out of the box, you could say, I really like the URSA Mini 4.6K more. Now here's that same test again on the A6300, but this is now in a different image profile. So this is the Cine 2 Gamma, and otherwise all the same identical camera settings. And the Cine 2 Gamma is it's a little bit closer to sort of a, you could say, a standard video profile. so it's not going to capture as much of a dynamic range, but still, as you can see, it performs well in this shot. Again, this is the ungraded version, and now here is the graded version of that shot. So once you adjust the colors, I think again the camera performs really nicely, captures I think all the details. It looks, you know, all the details in the highlights and the shadows, and again, no more or anti-aliasing problems. So again, it's just really comes down to what setting or what image profile you think is gonna best suit the kind of a video shoot that you're doing. Now the next camera we have is the Panasonic G85, and this one is in Cinelike D at ISO 400, which is the base ISO, and again white balance is 4000 Kelvin. And as you can see, as she takes off the vest, there's no horrible overexposure. The same thing when she sits down here. I think the exposure overall, or the dynamic range, I should say, is well handled. Now let's take a look at that same shot but color graded, because Cinelike D is sort of, you could say, like a lag profile. It's a little bit more flat, so it doesn't have as much of this the contrast and the colors, so definitely needs color grading. And I think when it comes to the actual final colors, I think I like this. I think it's very close actually to the URSA, I think. Now let's look at the same shot on the G85, but this is in Cinelike V and ISO 400, and again white balance 4000 Kelvin. And this is how this shot looks. It definitely looks kind of weird, needs some color grading. So here is the same shot but now color graded. So again, Cinelike V, ISO 400, white balance 4000, and color grading it looks like this. But I definitely, just when comparing it to the Cinelike D, I think it looks a lot better in Cinelike D version. And here it is, just so you can kind of compare how it looked in that profile. Anyways, now let's jump to the Panasonic GH4. And here's how the shot looks and the Cinelike D profile. And otherwise all the same settings, actually the same lens and everything as the G85. And as you'll notice, again, the camera had no problems handling the 5 steps of dynamic range that Isabella walks through, and also no moire or anti-aliasing, I think, artifacts. And actually, the GH4 is one of my favorite sort of small go-to cameras, and one of the reasons is because the 4K out of it looks really beautiful. So again, watch the full 4K version if you want to see the details and all of these shots. And anyways, here's that same shot but now color graded. I think the colors look really nice. Now let's take a look at the same shot but shot in Cinelike V. So this is at ISO 400, again white balance 4000 Kelvin, and in Cinelike V with the exact same camera settings and everything, I find that the raw shot well, actually looks a little bit almost too contrasty for me, like to basically the shadows really disappear. There's not much detail in here, and also the colors for some reason seem to be like almost changed. So now let's take a look at that same shot but just color graded a little bit. Looks better, but definitely I think if you want to capture the most detail and the nicest colors on the GH4, I would shoot in Cinelike D. And if you guys want to see the exact details of the Cinelike D settings that I'm using, those are the exact same settings that I did or showed in my original review of the Panasonic GH4, which I did a few years ago. So again, I'll provide a link to that in the description of this video. Now, just for the hell of it, again, I decided to throw in a completely different camera that has nothing to do with the rest of these cameras. It's not even 4K. It's this little Canon G7X. It's a camera that I use for my sort of personal home videos, photos, or vlogging, simply because it's a really tiny camera. But I wanted to kind of show you how the same scene, when you have basically a properly lit scene, you could say a nice location, things like that. It seems like these days any camera is going to be able to perform and capture, I think, a nice looking image. Now, definitely this one is not shooting in 4K, so as you notice that it's not as sharp. There's not as much of that detail, and again, the dynamic range of this camera, simply because it does not have any sort of special image profiles, it's not able to capture all of those details in the highlights and the shadows. But is it able to produce a nice looking image? Could you even shoot a whole film on this? Yes, you could. So just kind of shows you that even if you get like a small camera like this, or maybe even some other pro cameras, but the cameras that are really outdated, maybe a few years old, something that you can pick up used maybe on eBay or something like that, for $200-300. I think these days really there is no excuse not to be able to produce a good quality video or film or music video or whatever it is that you're working on. It just really comes down to taking the time to setting up your scene, your shots, your angle, things like that. Because as you'll notice, even the Canon G7X is able to recreate the scene fairly well.
All right, so that's another good test, right?
Yeah.
Take a look at the actual images, well composed, designed images. But for me, still, I just cannot, not see any of us watching a piece of entertainment, whatever it is, film, music videos, and so on, and like watching it with that mindset that we just had.
Well, and also because you're usually like a certain project or whatever film you're watching is usually shot on one camera, or at least that one scene or whatever you're watching. So you're never going to be jumping back and forth and comparing it. So since all the cameras do perform, perform well, just give you a nice image, nice sharp, crisp image, and they can handle the scene. I think it's just what the test also shows you is that cameras these days can all basically do a good job if you have the right person behind the camera, and in front of the camera, I guess, setting up the scene and all that stuff. That's what's really most important. So I mean, whether you're getting the most affordable camera that we're showing here today, or maybe something else that you found, or the most expensive, really just comes down to the skills that you have as a cinematographer. Because like you said, an average viewer, somebody who's especially watching a movie, like, invested in the story, then I'm gonna care about how the highlights roll off on this one, or maybe I would prefer the skin tones look a little bit like that. They won't care. They're just gonna be watching it for the story. So all of these cameras can definitely be used by serious filmmakers.
Right. I would just quickly maybe touch on the whole discussion. Sometimes people still get started the discussion. What's the point of having 4K, especially if we don't finish in 4K, which nowadays we shoot almost everything in 4K, but most stuff we don't finish in 4K. You want to just?
But I noticed that even our workflow, more and more like projects now we are actually starting to do. So I think very soon it's going to switch where most projects will end in 4K. But even if you're not, I mean, if you're doing special effects, if you want to do post-image stabilization, if you want to do reframing, right, recropping of your shots, anything like that. Having the 4K, I think, is even very important, even if you're finishing in 1080. So
just being able to just zoom in and basically use one camera instead of two, getting the wider shot and the close-up is big. And
I mean, 4K is here to stay, and now there's cameras going higher than 4K, obviously. So definitely it's something I think you guys should look into it. But do you need 4K really? I guess no. You could still pick up old used 1080p cameras, for example, that you can find even on eBay these days.
Sure.
Like the test showed, you can get some very simple point-and-shoot cameras, and they'll also do an amazing job, because I think these days pretty much, I mean, even your cell phone can do. If you know what you're doing, I would say it's more about the skills. If you know what you're doing, how you frame your shots, the locations you choose, how you control the lighting, if you can. Then I think most cameras these days we're going to perform and do a nice, produce a nice image.
Yeah, I mean, so they all have very good image quality. Now, for pro users, I guess the lenses, having a good set of lenses is really important. That makes a big difference. So hardware, still makes is important, right? And
the good thing about lenses is if you invest in lenses, if you invest in the right lenses, those are things that you will not change. Like the cameras will come and go, you might change those and upgrade them, but the lenses you'll keep on using. So that's a good thing, at least. You don't have to worry about forking out more money each time. So.
4K, but just to sum up, 4K is not a must, but since it is these cameras are affordable, it's if they are within your budget, makes sense to buy them because
Yeah.
there are various advantages.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I guess there's anything else we want to say about like the wrap up of the, I mean, I'll tell you guys that I kind of expected that already, that a lot of these cameras are going to be different, but they're all going to produce, I guess, good image quality. Now, they all have their weaknesses and strengths, so you kind of have to, I guess, know that and kind of always emphasize the strengths, not the weaknesses, right? Like I've said many times before that, my new favorite cinema camera is the URSA Mini 4.6K because of the things that I mentioned. But is it perfect for all occasions? No, right? It's a big camera, requires big batteries, all that stuff. So it's slower, harder to work with. Whereas you can get, for example, like a lot of times if I'm doing, like right now we're on location here in Ecuador, and there's no way I could have taken the URSA with me, and we're actually shooting this on the Panasonic GH4. Why? Because it's just a great portable small camera that records, amazing 4K video. So that's one thing. Now you can do that with the G85. If you need something that's really good in low light, there's no way you're going to be shooting with any cinema camera. Forget about URSA Mini, but even like the Ariel Alexa or Red cameras, they're just not good in low light. So that's when you'll be using, something like a Sony a7S II, or now the more affordable version of it, the Sony a6300.
I mean, looking back, if another, I guess, little tip in terms of looking for good 4K camera, good camera to consider is the G7 from Panasonic, which is, again, we're going to do, I'm pretty sure we're going to do a video about that camera, but it's very, you're also going to get very good 4K. There are some disadvantages, over when it comes compared to the G85. But if you don't care about the image stabilization, then I would say G7 is a really good option too.
Yeah.
So that's again, like, it's great that these cameras are coming.
There's a lot of options.
Cameras are coming out, because usually if you just go like one generation back, you can still get the same image quality, and save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, but there are other things that make a camera good. So
yeah.
So we're not, in this video, we're not talking about everything, right? So there's a reason why.
And we're not, like I mentioned at the beginning, we're not obviously, there's a lot of other cameras that we could have tested out. And I know some of the requests I've been getting was for the Sony FS5. Now, FS5 is actually over $5,000, and it's so it is a big chunk of money, and just like the URSA Mini. But
and you've used it.
I've used it.
Have an opinion on
and
it.
I have an opinion. And my opinion was it has a lot of great features, but at the end of the day, for that kind of money, I would expect like some pro quality at the end of the day from the image, and it has a bad compression basically in the codec. So that's the reason why I didn't include that. The Sony FS7 is a great camera, but that's pretty much with everything added on. It's close to $10,000. There's another camera people wanted me to review, which was the Red Raven. I couldn't even get my hands on it. Literally all my friends who pre-ordered it, they're still waiting. And for those of you who are following, that now the cameras have been pushed pretty much till the end of 2017. So, there's a lot of other options, a lot of announcements that were made. But I think right now, from the cameras I think that we picked, those are like the best choices that are available for you right now to get, and they produce.
They're readily available.
Yeah, and
maybe except for the URSA Mini 4.6, which was a bit of a hunt for us.
But now it seems like people are getting their orders, and it's thing. So you can actually get it, fairly quickly, and like I said, so there's definitely a lot of options. I think at the end of the day, I guess there's no one perfect camera. It's really just the camera that you think is going to be best for your style of shooting. So hopefully this test helped you guys, kind of make up your mind and pick the right one, I guess.
Now Tom in the video goes over a lot of detail.
Oh yeah.
So you probably if you wanna find out more, or recap some of the information some of the stats and he was giving in the video, then please go to our website. There's
we're gonna be posting actually most stuff about each individual, more specified tests about each of these cameras, more like test charts. I actually did some focus charts and things like that, and color charts with some of these cameras. So I'm going to be releasing further videos, and like I said, updated review on the Sony a6300, how it applies basically in a real film kind of a shoot. So there's going to be more updates. So definitely go to our website, subscribe to the newsletter, right? If you want to be notified of all the things. And just stay tuned, and hopefully you guys have a happy, I guess, a great new year, the 2017.
Let's make a whole great 2017.
Yeah.
Let's make it a great year, and hopefully wish I wish you all the best in 2017.
Yeah.
Plane.
We got helicopters. I don't know, they're tracking us down, but we're gonna be finishing up because I guess I'm looking forward to actually just take it easy for a few days and go to the beach. So.
Vamos a la playa. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, see you later, guys.
Bye.